Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and it's day 50 of Not Spawn Year. Yeah, made it all the way to 50 consecutive days of single-issue comic reviews, and today, for this exciting, spectacular, landmark video, I wanted to review one of the nicer pieces of my collection, and this isn't an issue that I ever actually bothered to read before, but is a super famous cover that you're all familiar with, I'm sure, that has been parodied constantly, including by the artist himself, and this is kind of a marriage of artists that and writers that we've already dealt with this year. So today, I'm going to take a look at the Incredible Hulk, I'm bumping into my microphone, number 340. And I bought this maybe 3 years ago at a flea market where my wife's mom lives, and I've been there a couple of times, and every time I go, there's this booth that has just remarkably well-priced silver and Bronze Age stuff that's often in really nice shape, and I always spend a fortune when I go into that store. I forget what I paid for this. I think it was in the range of 60 to 80. I got this for a decent price, particularly for the condition that it's in. I don't even want to handle this too much, and I couldn't bring myself to pop this out of the sleeve and actually read it. So I read this in digital. I have opened this once before just to inspect the pages and see what the colors look like inside, and to see how faded it is and if it has any dings or anything. But this might be close to near mint. It's definitely very fine. I want to call it super fine, if not near mint. But I'd be surprised if this wasn't at least a 9, if not a little bit better than that. If I was going to get anything actually graded, this would be in my top 5. So I partly just wanted to show that off because it's really pretty, but now we're going to go ahead and, of course, review it. So right in the middle of a story arc here, with stuff that I've never read before. This is written by Peter David with art by Todd McFarlane. And recently I did a Peter David Hulk from several years after this, and I reviewed a Todd McFarlane Spider-Man issue. So I'm going well before both of those in these guys' career. And these are, of course, two guys that do not get along now, and it's really interesting seeing them work together because I think they're quite a force with just taking a look at this issue, but they had real different opinions about the comic book industry and about each other's careers, and famously they had a huge debate at a convention in the early 90s that is a kind of an infamous moment in comic history, and you can go on YouTube and find video recordings of that, and it's very interesting, and McFarlane is kind of a crazy person and is acting pretty darn childish, but it's really entertaining to watch. But anyway, this is from 1988, and it reads like a kind of 50-50 split between a Hulk issue and an X-Men issue, and it's called Vicious Circle. And one of the things I like a lot about this issue is just scene transitions, and as on the nose as some of it is, symbolism. So we've got a snow globe right at the beginning, and I feel like this is not the first issue that's had this particular metaphor, and maybe about some of the same things that we have tackled already this year in Spawn, not Spawn Year. But, and I also, by the way, wanted to go back to a McFarlane thing for 50, because McFarlane always likes to make a really big deal out of landmarks, and I've been kind of dancing around Spawn a lot, even as I'm not reviewing Spawn things. Unlike the Spider-Man issue that I reviewed a few days ago, though, this does not look like a Spawn issue. You obviously can see a lot of the sensibilities of McFarlane's art that he'll use in Spawn, but it's sketchier, it feels a lot earlier earlier before he is as experienced as an artist. And for this material, I think it works great. I certainly like some of his later art more than this, just subjectively, but I kind of like how Millerish some of his pencil work is here, particularly in the big fight that we'll have, the inevitable fight, of course, with Wolverine and Hulk later on in this issue, calling back to the original Hulk and Wolverine fight and dealing with just how different these guys have become and how, much of the same kind of entity they were when they first met, being fully immersed in their respective monsters, and how much they've both changed together, where each of them seems smarter and more, particularly with the Hulk, but more mature and more civilized, which is a word that Wolverine throws around a few times. And the big question is, how much has either of these guys actually changed? But I'll get to more of that in just a minute. But like I said, scene transitions. So you've got someone holding a snow globe on the first page, and we'll find out later on that that is, in fact, Betty. And then we get into a blizzard, a literal blizzard. And we keep doing this with stuff with this, where we'll start with a metaphor or an idea in a different context, and then we'll transition to another scene where it's not just like a cute line that carries over that is sort of connected to the next thing, but ideas that are also very interconnected. So it's layered, and it's just good, strong comic writing. So there's this big mysterious storm, and reading just this issue, I don't know what's causing it. My assumption is that it has something to do with Storm herself, maybe, because the X-Men are investigating her disappearance. She is missing and apparently doesn't have her powers, and we're in the middle of this big, massive storm that is affecting everybody, and that is, just because it's massive, but is affecting Hulk on a personal level because it's somehow making him angrier. It's messing with his emotions. It's like there's a mention at the beginning of the moon being blotted out by Rick, I think. You've got Rick there and a character named Clay, who apparently was real close to Betty and Banner years before the Hulk, or Banner became the Hulk. I don't know if he's related to Betty. I didn't actually look him up. Maybe I should have done that, but that's not a character that I'm familiar with. Seems to be a main supporting character in this particular run. So anyway, we've got some of the popular characters in the X-Men in the 80s that are not as popular later on. Dazzler's here, who was kind of big back then. She's in the X-Men beat 'em up arcade game. Longshot is here, and you've got Havoc, who doesn't do really anything in this issue, and the only character besides Wolverine that's hugely popular in the 90s and beyond is Rogue. But anyway, so the X-Men are dealing with kind of some standard X-Men melodrama, soap opera stuff. Something has happened to Storm's powers, like I said. Maybe it has nothing to do with the storm. I don't know. I haven't read anything past this. But we kind of just get dropped into this because Marvel is so good at continuity at this point. I'm sure if you're reading the regular X-Men book right now, this will be seamless jumping from that over to this, but it catches us up to speed fairly well, but I'm a little in the dark, so somehow Storm's lost her powers, I don't know how, and she's missing. They're trying to find her, and there's some kind of premonition that somebody's had about the X-Men dying in Dallas, but they've got to go to Dallas for some reason, and the Hulk kind of causes this whole situation because he's kind of out going for a Hulk walk, and he's just real angry, and he's jumping around everywhere, and he runs into the X-Jet, which makes them in turn hit a commercial airliner. Oh no. And that ruins one of the engines, and so they've got to figure out what to do with this engine that's on fire, and also investigate and make sure that everybody's okay with this airplane. And I guess nobody gets hurt ultimately, but I'm fuzzy on that. But anyway, so Rogue is worried about dropping this engine on somebody that might be down below, and Wolverine says that's a risk we're going to have to take. Hopefully there's nobody down there. Just drop it somewhere real dark where it doesn't seem like remote, doesn't seem like there's going to be anybody there. And so they do that, and then Wolverine goes down to investigate the plane and to make sure that nobody got hurt when they dropped that that engine. And so there's a fair amount of realism relatively with this whole thing, and I like that we're real concerned with collateral damage. And now Wolverine finds the Hulk. He immediately smells the Hulk and is confused because the Hulk's scent has changed, which I imagine has something to do with him being the Gray Hulk now. And it's interesting that Wolverine doesn't actually comment on that, the fact that his color has changed, but he's like, something is different about him. And this is another scene transition that I think is wonderful, where Wolverine is dealing with being used to being the loner and letting his instincts drive him, and now he's, as he says, more civilized, and he has to be the leader. And he says, nothing is funny when you're the leader. And then we transition over to the leader, and I haven't broken down yet what the Hulk has been doing. I've just been talking about the X-Men side, but the big kind of scary plot in the background with this whole thing, and what Rick and Clay are up to, is they are trying to figure out how to stop the government from using gamma bombs to develop new Hulks. It seems like the government wants to make an army of Hulks, and the leader is trying to get in on that action as well, and maybe he's actually behind the whole thing. I can't tell. I'm not sure if he's causing all of that, or if it seems like he's just finding out about it and then trying to take advantage of the situation and get the gamma bombs for himself. He doesn't have a lot of screen time here. It seems like we kind of just put a pin in that, kind of like just putting a pin in the whole Storm situation. McFarlane creates a ton of, there's the snow globe again, creates a ton of atmosphere that harkens back to, I think it's Hulk 181, when the Hulk and Wolverine first fight. And like I said, we're going to kind of go back and talk about that. The shadow there with the grimace with Hulk in that top left panel is a very classic McFarlane drawing. He does that with Spawn all the time. And I like the way he's drawing Hulk here, because he seems way more massive even than normal, and that's kind of a plot point, that he's getting angrier, he's getting bigger, and Wolverine is just going to make him angrier. And so one of the big parallels between them is that they both kind of have a healing factor. And Wolverine, this is one of those issues that, even though there are some surrounding story things that make it a little bit confusing to read all by itself, it is another really good encapsulation of who the Hulk is, and a good kind of character study, giving you both sides of the man and dealing with the duality of both of these characters. And Wolverine kind of breaks down why the Hulk has a healing factor that is similar to his, and talks about the Hulk as being kind of a cancer for Bruce Banner, that cancer is cells that are growing abnormally, and that is exactly what the Hulk is. And I never thought about it exactly that way. And it's interesting just, how old this issue is, like 35 years old, and it's never occurred to me, maybe just because I'm not a Hulk guy. Maybe a lot of Hulk fans have thought of that. Wolverine dons his mask, I suspect, so that we can make this even more like their original meeting and parallel that fight, because of course he's in costume when they first meet. It's not this costume. He has a mask that famously is very different and doesn't have the points at the top. if memory serves. But this is his classic 80s costume, or maybe a costume that is kind of beginning to transition into what he'll have in the 90s, because I remember this as being kind of like brown and black and not really having yellow in it. But maybe I'm just remembering that incorrectly. I'm actually going to look this up real quick, because now I'm feeling kind of like comic colorblind. But I'm just going to look up Wolverine's original costume. Yeah, I guess it always had some yellow in it. So I was thinking about this wrong. But now I wish I hadn't said anything. But anyway, so he's got his old brown suit here, and the vicious circle idea, which more often I guess is referred to as a vicious cycle, is that, and what the snow globe metaphor is all about, is being stuck in a rut, not being able to change, not being able to become more than the sum of your parts. And that's what Wolverine has always been afraid that he is, that he really isn't civilized, that he is deep down the monster. It's an identity question. Who am I really versus the choices temporarily I seem to be able to make, but ultimately I always wind up back at the monster place. And the Hulk has kind of the same thing, except he's accepted it. He's embraced it. He is smarter than he was before, and, able to speak in complete sentences and everything, but he fully embraces the monster. As soon as Wolverine shows up, he's like, we're going to fight, let's go. And Wolverine says, no, I don't want to do that. And immediately, just protecting himself, it's just self-defense, he pops his claws out and scratches Hulk, and he basically just says, my bad. He said, I'm sorry. And he tries to walk away, and the Hulk won't let him do that. And in a weird way, the Hulk's message here, he seems to be at a real low point. His message is almost the Dark Knight Joker message, which is, we're all animals, we're all instinct-driven, and our civilized nature is just a facade. It's just a mask that we wear. And nobody, this is the Hulk talking now, nobody is better than me, because they all have a monster in them, and at the end of the day, we're all going to resort to our monster. And Wolverine proves it, because deep down, he really actually does want to fight the Hulk, and is compelled to engage in this, even though he's fighting that instinct really hard, and he worries about what that says about him. And I think the message with the issue at the end of the day is that you can break out of that cycle, but the monster will always be inside of you. Again, it's that duality, it's that dichotomy. We are all, none of us is all good or all bad. None of us is all instinct or all intelligence. The human condition is we're a bit of both. And we, as difficult as it is, maybe we do always have a choice, but we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to resort sometimes to our baser instincts. And so at the end of the issue, Longshot shows up, or not Longshot, pardon me, it's Rick and Clay again. They show up and kind of fire an energy weapon, I think, at them. This fight goes on for a real long time. It's wonderfully drawn. It's a lot of fun to look at. I think the coloring is a little bit odd, personally, in places. It feels like, this is maybe an odd criticism, but Wolverine is drawn a little bit too two-tone for my taste. It's kind of weird that there's not a little bit more depth in the color work there. But I feel like it's just a little bit inconsistent with the rest of the issue. But like I said, maybe kind of an odd criticism, but it's a thing I noticed as I was reading it. And anyway, they snap out of it, which suggests that they both, do indeed have the ability to choose. And then Wolverine says, or the Hulk says, look, I'm better than all of you. I've proved it here. And Wolverine says, yeah, okay, whatever. And he just kind of leaves. And I think the Hulk is getting the wrong idea as opposed to what the issue seems to be saying, which again is that yes, they can be more than the sum of their parts, but they both still have the monster there. And what the Hulk has learned from this is, yeah, see, look, you're not any better than me, and I'm better than you because I guess I did better in this fight. And then, although nobody actually really won, if that's the sort of thing you care about, if you're keeping score, if you look at comics as like a sporting event, and then you get to the end, and the big reveal is that Betty has the snow globe, and I guess it's not really a reveal at the very end. We just finally kind of converge these plots, and maybe it's a little bit convenient that she happens to be holding the snow globe as Clay is looking at an old picture of her with the snow globe. But we bookend it, and we find out that that's who's been talking, and she's trying to break out of her own vicious cycle where she loves Bruce Banner and she wants to be with him, but because he has embraced his monster too much, she doesn't want to keep just going the rounds with him. And so she breaks the snow globe at the end, which is a tragic symbol for her breaking out of the cycle in a way that arguably the Hulk and Wolverine sort of have, but the Hulk or Wolverine doesn't think that he's able to. So, different kinds of cycles, but all related to the monster within and what the Hulk has been doing. And it's kind of a sad way to end the issue, and kind of interesting that like the breaking of the snow globe, you would think would be kind of a positive image, given that it's all about being stuck in a rut and not being able to change and not being able to leave this finite world, but it isn't that. It's real tragic, and I enjoyed this issue a lot, and I'm glad that I finally read it. Certainly would recommend it, and really got lucky with this copy that I managed to find a couple years back. Well, anyway, that is going to conclude the 50th episode of Not Spawn Year, and I'll be back with 51 tomorrow, and you'll just have to tune in to find out what we're going to look at. I was Captain Logan, and happy reading. Thanks, everybody.